We're happy to be joined now by former Detroit Lions quarterback Eric Hipple, a fourth-round pick in the 1980 NFL Draft by the Lions, spent 9 years in the National Football League. He's the outreach coordinator of the Depression Center at the University of Michigan. He also has written a book. It's called Real Men Do Cry, and he's in town right now. In fact, Mr. Hipple joins us now. Eric, Paul Allen, and Paul Charchian, good morning.
Hello, Paul and Paul. How are you? Very good.
We're doing well. You spoke at Mount Olivet Church last evening, didn't you?
Yes, I did. A great turnout too. We had 250 plus showed up, and real good dinner, real good meeting, real good evening.
Eric, before we get into some heavier type topics and issues and stuff like that, tell us more about the FaceItFoundation.org, the Face It Foundation, but online FaceItFoundation.org.
Well, the Face It Foundation is the executive director is Mark Meyer, and they built this foundation to support men trying to overcome depression, and through their own life experience, and that's how I met him, and so through collaboration with the Depression Center and himself, I came out here and support them in their efforts.
You yourself have struggled with depression, and according to what I've seen, you attempted suicide at one time. Let me start here. What is the most what's the most cumbersome thing to overcome if you are a man? You may be facing depression. Is it internalizing and trying to be too macho and not face it?
Well, I think part of it, certainly the culture that I grew up in, with football, of course, is you don't want to show any weakness, and you're used to battling through things, and when you get knocked down, you get back up again. That's what you're used to doing, and so half of it, I think, the battle is not even knowing when things aren't going right, not even knowing what the cause is, because we're not educated in that area, and some of the research that we've done anyway with the NFLPA, we have about a prevalence of about 15%. Of former players that are suffering from depression, which is higher than the national average for men of that same age group. So it's out there, and it's just recognizing, I think, what the symptoms are, the fact that they are tied to an illness that we call now depression, and that there are things that you can do about it, and it's treatable. But the thing is, guys are fix-it people, and so I'll fix it myself. I'll do it myself, and so the internalization is kind of the nature of the beast of the illness. You kind of pull away from your support systems, because that's one of the symptoms basically is internalizing.
Is for former players in particular, Eric, is part of the formula for depression that you've gone from being the biggest, coolest guy in your high school to the biggest, coolest guy in your college to a guy who's being cheered on by 50,000 people in a stadium. And then your career ends, and you're back at home looking around, going, "Well, now what? Nobody's cheering me. I'm just taking trips to the grocery store, and I've got a life as an actuarial."
Well, that's part of it, but it goes much deeper than that. And you start looking at, and I'll address the former players, for example. You start looking at what actually happens, and when they are released or they are cut, I don't think only a few people leave the game on their own volition.
Yeah.
But when they're cut, there's a whole lot of losses that are involved. There's loss of support system. There's a little bit of loss of identity. They lose their doctors and stuff that they see every day. They're kicked out the door. There's a little bit of ostracism that goes on there. But all those losses and then being booted out creates a lot of stress and a lot of loss involved. And there is no debriefing. There is no transition period that we go through. It's just all of a sudden it's there, and the timing can be sudden, can be any time, so you don't really have time to prepare for it. And so all of those losses are like a grief period that can really exasperate if you have a predisposition for depression anyway. And so you start looking at the genetics and everything else, and also the injuries. 48% of guys suffer from chronic pain, based on our research anyway. And so you take a pain issue as well that also, exasperates, the depressive mood. And so there's a lot of things that are going on there at the time that happens. I think that's what drives the numbers. But the illness itself, is, it can hit anybody, anytime. It just depends on, what we go through. And it's something that's basically kind of somewhat genetic.
Men facing depression and how to tackle it. Learn more at FaceItFoundation.org. The nice people over there, including Mark Meyer, helped us facilitate this interview with former Lions quarterback Eric Hipple, who has gone down this road before. Eric, do you still battle depression? Is it still a daily thing for you?
Well, I think it's something that that I've got a great handle on it right now, and I would say I'm probably one of the most mentally fit people you'll meet now, and a lot of it is because I have learned, and I do manage it work quite well, and but I want to point out the fact that as I said, it can hit anybody at any time. What really drove me into this area wasn't so much myself; it was I lost my son to suicide, and he was 15 years old. And he had all those classic symptoms as well, so it can affect anybody. And in fact, the second leading cause of death in college-age kids is suicide, and it's the third leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. And so it's something we really need to be aware of.
Eric, were there signs that you missed as a parent because you just didn't know then?
Well, yeah. I mean, and they're very classic signs. Problems with sleep, eating, either eating too much or eating too little, kind of pains that you don't, like stomach aches, back aches, kind of like flu-like symptoms, concentration problems, hopelessness, and then thoughts of death. And those are the kind of the classic symptoms. I had those, but I didn't know that they were tied to an illness. And not until after I lost Jeff that became aware of that there's an illness that can cause those things, and that's when I started seeking treatment.
When you say helplessness in terms of kids, like we have a lot of parents listening right now. Okay, everybody has their own deals. Some are good, some are bad. If you are looking at a 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, a teenage type kid, and you're listening to this interview, if you think you see some of these things, what's the first thing you should do, Eric?
Have an open conversation, and remember, it's how they feel, it's their perceptions. Doesn't mean that's how we see it. They might have the greatest support system in the world, but if they feel, their moods change, and all of a sudden their grades drop, and all of a sudden they start isolating, they're not talking to their friends anymore. They seem a little bit more irritated and agitated, and it's really, and they're starting to have sleep problems, and they don't feel well, and they might say, I just don't feel good, and those issues. And remember, it's really hard because of teenagers. There's a whole lot of things that are going on in their brain. There's actually some changes that are being made. The prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making process and stuff. And so they're up and down all the time. But it's when it becomes a consistent mood, and then they seem down for a period of time of at least 2 weeks or longer, and it's really not tied to anything. And you start seeing some of those problems there. And of course, as you leak into those teenage years, they'll start using of drugs or alcohol. Becomes abusing problem. So those are things that they should be aware of. And anytime you hear one that says, it'd be better off if I just wasn't around anymore, that's something to be really concerned about.
You remember Eric Hipple as the longtime Detroit Lions quarterback. He is now a spokesman for FaceItFoundation.org. We're talking about male depression. If you are a parent and you're hearing these things, they're starting to resonate a little bit. The course of action, is it to go find professional help for this? Is it to go online, go to FaceItFoundation.org and look for symptoms? Is there a snappy 10-question test that you take to find out how serious this is?
Well, there are actually DepressionToolkit.org. It's called DepressionToolkit.org. Is a site to go. They have an assessment test on there. It's called the PHQ-9, which is recognized across the world. It's a simple 9-question deal that you can assess with. Mm-hmm. And then also on that site, there's a lot of information and also some quick vids and stuff like that of explaining what depression is and things we can do, to be a little bit more resilient. But the main thing is to have an open, matter-of-fact conversation of how are you doing, what's going on, and not one, you shouldn't feel that way because you've got lots of friends. You shouldn't feel down.
Yeah.
Look at the other people. Don't compare them. Don't do stuff like that. Just have an open conversation with them. Remember, it's how they feel.
That's brilliant, Eric. That's fantastic, man. In closing here, your book, Real Men Don't Cry. From the information I have here, which discusses Hipple's playing career with the Lions, there are so many one-liners we can insert with playing for the Lions and depression, but I don't want to do it.
It's funny that you say that because when I first wrote the book, Real Men Do Cry, the Lions weren't doing too well, and when I would go out and talk, they assumed I wrote the book because I played for the Lions.
Yeah, but I just don't think it's the time right now, man. And plus, you know what? The Lions swept my favorite team, the Vikings, last year, so who am I to take shots at the history of the Lions? But anyway, it details the warning signs of teens who have committed suicide. It was published in 2009. I would assume people, A, can still get that book online, and B, is there anything else we need to know about this topic before we say goodbye?
I think just having an openness and the fact that we can bring it up and have matter-of-fact conversations, and that it's a sign of strength to be able to talk about this and not a sign of weakness, and that people are not alone. There's a lot of people that are going through this. It's pretty prevalent.
Thank you, my friend, and best of luck to you in your travels. Thanks for sharing time. Thank Mark Meyer for me for setting this up, and thanks for working with FaceItFoundation.org.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
No problem. Bye-bye. Eric Hipple, former Lions quarterback. Men with depression.
We didn't even get into, for us, now that we're in our 40s, there's a huge percentage of my friends that are honest to God going through midlife crisis.
Yep.
And we didn't even get into, the midlife crisis part of this, which would have been a whole separate conversation.
Save that number, please. We have much more we would like to share with him, Joe, and maybe periodically could do this and get him back on, because I do believe this is a serious, significant, and underrated problem in society. Men with depression.
Yeah.
Where they don't want to talk about certain things because they are men, and maybe just having open moments like that triggers one person to sit back and listen in their cube or in their car or wherever they're listening right now and say, you know what, I haven't closed a sales deal in 3 weeks, and that's getting me down, and maybe I have midlife crisis, and my son is not on the travel teams, and everybody else's is, and I have to hear about that every day. Maybe it's not just circumstance. Maybe I'm depressed.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll contact or consult somebody to see if I am, and see where it goes. So I really thank the people who helped me set that up, specifically the Face It Foundation. Bless you all, and best of luck to you. Paul